What does it mean to be an advanced drummer in 2024? Well, in one sense, music is subjective. If it sounds and feels musical, it is. In another sense, with many drummers around the world working on our technique, feel, improvisation, and musicality, certain benchmarks emerge. Like, I'm sure we'd say Thomas Pridgeon is advanced. I'm sure we'd say Noah Feuerbringer is advanced. And not just chops players. I'm sure we'd say Ash Sohn is advanced. Or Yusuf Days. Or Peter Yancic. And you might be the type of player who took up drums to play with a band, and you're only interested in molding yourself to the song. And that's valid. And there are some great musicians in that category. But if you're a practice room hound trying to improve your technique, you might be wondering, what is advanced in this day and age? Say you're an aspiring drummer who wants to be a working player in today's musical genres, and you're looking for a scorecard. Not so you can impose arbitrary categories on art, but so you have a barometer for what to improve, and can feel good about what you've already achieved. Well, today I'm going to give you 5 skills I think are crucial for drummers to consider themselves advanced, in that slightly more technical drumistic, I spend a lot of hours in the practice room sort of way. And they may be different from what was considered advanced 20 years ago because the art keeps evolving. I'm Nate, and people call me the 80/20 drummer. And here on the channel we go a little deeper, a little more OCD, if you will, about some of the more technical and philosophical aspects of drumming. Blah, blah. And if you keep watching, I'll break down each of these skills, show examples of real-life drummers I think epitomize them, then break down in broad strokes how I would practice each of them. Today on 80/20, 5 crucial skills to be considered an advanced drummer in 2024. Stay tuned. And folks, in today's video, we're going to have a bunch of beats and licks and all that good stuff, and you might be tempted to transcribe. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to have done it for you. You can get that for free by clicking the link below the player and telling us where to send it. That's it, on with the lesson. Skill 1, one-handed 16ths. This is a skill I do not believe we would have considered a bar for entry 20 years ago. But since then, so many good drummers have learned this skill, it's now par for the course. Why? Let me preface that this is off the top of my head history, and it will be incomplete. But here goes. Probably because that's the direction music has gone. In the 2000s, we saw people like Erykah Badu, Michelle Ndegeocello, Robert Glasper, and more resurrecting a lot of the funk and soul music from the 1970s. And drum beats like those from Harvey Mason, Mike Clark, Bernard Purdie, Lenny White, Billy Cobham, and Clyde Stubblefield. Not to mention Jeff Porcaro came to the fore. Drummers like Poogie Bell, Chris Dave, Kareem Riggins, Questlove, and later on Nate Smith, Adam Deitch, Mark Kohlenberg, and Corey Fonville all carried this forward. You get into dangerous territory talking about history because there's always the danger of leaving people out. I should say Steve Gadd, for instance, was conversant with this style throughout his career, in case you think I'm leaving him out. I should also say many of the drummers I'm mentioning here are also famous for other things, but we're just mentioning them here because we're talking about it. Anyway, however you slice it, continuous 16ths with one hand are now the stock and trade for an advanced drummer in the 2020s. What we've seen is that due to the influence of some of the drummers I've mentioned, continuous 16ths became a thing modern drummers kind of flow into and out of. A Stubblefield funky drummer thing is almost like an ingredient you can sprinkle in when you need it. So, how do we get there? Well, with my students, we do it in 2 parts. The first is to work on hand technique. It's a technique a lot of drummers have used, but the person who probably put it into words better than anyone is Gordy Knudsen.
If I'm up higher too, I get a little more inertia or momentum from starting, and there's kind of some more energy to use.
Based on Gordy's techniques, I've come up with a routine for practicing this. First, I'll do what I call drop full strokes. I'll start with the stick about 6 inches above the head with a wrist angle, then drop the wrist and allow the fingers to flex fully so the stick rebounds fully back to touching my hand. Then I'll just reset and do it again. I try to put the minimum necessary force into the drum to get that rebound, since this is all about efficiency. Then I'll practice the catch, which is just retracting the fingers and pulling up the wrist again. After a few minutes of only dropped full strokes, I'll do extremely slow drop catches. Then I'll switch to something like I outlined in this video. Once you reach a certain speed, your pinch stroke is going to give way to an actual bounce, and you realize, I'm doing it! Sort of like riding a bike. It's okay if that feeling is fleeting at first. Once you're bouncing the strokes though, I want to give you one tip that helped me make my strokes more even. I found it's useful to catch on the downbeats and drop on the offbeats. So like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, drop, catch, drop, catch, drop, catch, drop, catch. This can be a lot of fun to do just alternating the hands. And you start incorporating the feet if you're on the kit to make a whole exercise out of it. The second half is the coordination of actually putting these beats together. I'll leave the card of that full video here on the screen so you can check it out on a side quest, but so we won't spend any more time on it for now. By the way, do you agree this is a requisite skill in 2024? Leave a comment below. From extended hand techniques, we move on to feet. Skill 2, continuous 8s with the hi-hat foot. This is another one that I don't think was on too many people's radar in 2000. But here it is, continuous 8s with the left foot. Here's Dana Hawkins doing it ably. Now, I could be wrong that not too many people cared about this in 2000. That could be personal opinion or anecdote, but in my humble opinion, there was a bigger divide between so-called jazz drummers and non-jazz drummers. So you'd see the left foot 8s in drummers with a jazz or fusion background, like Vinnie and Weckl or Dennis Chambers, whose hero was Billy Cobham, or Steve Gadd. A few things happened in the early 2000s, in my humble opinion, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. First, a whole generation of drummers had checked out Vinnie and Weckl, so you had jazz fusion idioms popping up in unexpected places. From drummers like Matt Garska bringing jazz and fusion vocabulary into prog rock and metal, to a whole generation of gospel players adopting a big part of the Weckl lexicon from some of his old DVDs. To fusion playing itself becoming more popular on the backs of people like Ronald Bruner, Thomas Pridgeon, and later Mike Mitchell, Dana Hawkins, and Larnell Lewis. Not to mention the JoJo Mayer lineage, with players like Keith Carlock and Zach Danziger, and later on Nate Wood, Mark Juliana, Louis Cole, Arthur Nedick, and J.D. Beck. Okay, this is the last of these for which I'm going to attempt a history lesson. But nowadays, I think to be advanced in the we practice drums technical idea of things, you've got to be able to bounce those hats like Tony did. Very quick progression, then I'll link to an earlier video I did for more detail. The most basic place to start would be just to keep the hats going while you do a conventional halftime funk or rock beat on the sound. But if you really want to get good at these, I'd take away the lead hand and practice doing some kick independence with only the left foot and left hand going. Here, I'll just go through a basic kick grid. Eventually, you'll want to practice contra coordination things like this, intentionally focusing on areas where your body will tend to feel out of balance. And finally, I like to practice everything I do, including improvising and fills, with the feet here. It's here that I'll drop a more detailed card to a lesson I did a few years back. Ready for a more conventional, less controversial one? Skill 3, fast, clean, relaxed fills. If you imagine a medium funk beat with a halftime snare placement, it's now stock and trade to be able to take a clean, relaxed fill in 16ths or 30 seconds, depending on where you count the pulse. I think this is also relatively new. I think 20 years ago, you could get away with the occasional embellishment or 16-note sprint during an 8-note fill, or implying double time. But since then, systems have gotten more efficient. I liken it to CrossFit, which, for better or worse, made a lot of seemingly esoteric techniques mainstream and systemized how to teach them. I'm not especially athletic, but I can do a bar muscle up and rope climb. Those were kind of considered gymnast skills until CrossFit systemized them for the masses, and now it's widely accepted anyone in reasonable shape can learn to do them. I think this is the case with fast fills. A whole generation of people learned these from Weckl, and now there are Gen 2 instructionals, and even Gen 3 as people like me, JP Bouvet, Stan, and others further try to systemize this style of playing. Tiny humble brag. I now have students who can come in and after 2 months be playing this stuff that kinda used to be considered elite. And I can take only a tiny fraction of the credit. It's mostly due to their efforts working through the system. For a video on what I believe is the state of the art in teaching this, click the card here. And also, I usually don't check out my friend JP Bouvet's materials because I'm worried about being too influenced. But when we have discussed these things, and from what I hear from my students, I think we're thinking in parallel a lot. But one tiny tidbit about this system is to learn a few discrete chunks, like right, left kick, and right, right kick. Then be able to switch between them and orchestrate them cleanly and musically. And gradually add more and more material until the line between switching and improvising becomes more and more faint. The reason this works is probably that you're learning little chunks modularly, so when you see them in the wild, you're able to do them cleanly with relaxation. Then you just tile your way to being able to improvise. As a postscript, I think you probably need to be able to do this type of fill on 3 axes. The first is 8th, 16th, 32nd. The second is triplets and sextuplets. And the third is doubled triplets. To get an idea what that means, imagine soloing over something like Home at Last by Steely Dan, where the pulse is slow triplets but you're doubling. Nick Smith did this to great effect with this fill. In real life, you're also going to want to switch between subdivisions and also leave space. Also, I'm not saying you need to pull these out like you're on a shed on every single song. Just that advanced modern drummers have these in their back pocket for when they need them. Ready for skill 4? Da-dadas with the lead hand. Nate, what do you mean by da-dadas? Ooh, mysterious. Let me flash a couple examples on the screen. The da-da-da is just the Spangalang swing pattern, straight. You might play it behind a halftime funk. Or maybe on the cymbal to give a little more energy to a cross-stick groove. We saw these a lot in the past with Tony Williams, who might deserve the most credit for straightening them out and bringing them into the realm of fusion. Billy Cobham, Lenny White, Steve Gadd, Vinnie Weckl, all the fusion players who mainstream drummers would come to emulate, used this jazz phrasing. Then you'll have the influence of disco and beats like Don't Stop Till You Get It Done, which, among many other things, inject this boom-ts-ka-ts-ba-boom-ts-ka into the lexicon. Whatever the history, they're now here to stay. And just like all the other skills, you could spend 10 years describing how to do them. What I often do with my students, however, is a drop-catch drop. Remember that push-pull stroke we were practicing earlier for our 16ths? Well, we can add a final drop stroke to that. If we speed it up, eventually the drop catch drop will elide into drop drop catch. Keep in mind, this is a little like saying if you practice side kicks enough, eventually you'll defeat your enemies. There's a lot of work you'll have to do to get familiar with the feeling of energy in the stick, and with my students, we work on this for months with lots of little adjustments. But that's the gist. Let me give you a couple beats to practice this over. This one is kind of a don't stop till you get it done one. And here's a second one that's more of a drum and bass thing. Both of these will be transcribed for you, and you can download the transcription for free at the link below the player. Honorable mention in this category is something like the beat Chris Dave plays in this Michelle and Dagier cello recording. I'd call this ambidextrous double time backbeats. It's a little more specific, so I'm not going to say it's crucial to being an advanced drummer, but it's a vibe you might want to have on the palette. Before we do our final one, let me just reiterate that music is art and art is subjective. I don't want anybody watching to take the message that, number one, you have to play in the style of these players I'm considering advanced, and that if you don't, your playing isn't good or valid. Or, two, even if you eventually want to play like these folks, but you can't right now, you can still hold down a solid groove and take a fill here or there, and support a band, that I'm saying you're bad. I present these only as aspirational bars to reach for. Lastly, I'm not claiming the Instagramization of drums is a universal positive. While drum videos being ubiquitous and easy to access has probably brought the average technical skill level of drummers up, it's probably also flattened the individuality between people and caused everybody to have a similar aesthetic. We have to be mindful of keeping our individuality, even as we emulate people with these skills. Think of it like learning a language. Just because we study a sentence from James Joyce or Hemingway doesn't mean we eventually have to write like they do. With all that out of the way, skill 5, precise, locked-in kick doubles. Let's watch a classic clip of Darian Javon that made a big impression on me in my 20s. It's not that kick doubles are new, nor is it even necessarily fast kick notes, but I think fast, powerful, quantized kick notes and doubles with a single pedal are more prevalent now than 20 years ago, and hence, if you're looking for a bar for advanced technical drumming, this isn't a bad one. Here's Jairus Yoker. Here's Juliana from the early 2010s. And I'm not saying this is exactly the same thing, but here's Nate Wood on my podcast talking about how drumming lately has gotten more staccato.
Now the way people are playing is huge attack, very quick decay, and the sustain is lower. And what that gets you is a punchier sound that's not as loud for as long. So you can actually, it's more hip hop is what it is, really.
And if we rewind back to even Tony Williams, who certainly had the ability to do whatever he wanted on the drums, the style was less quantized. I wouldn't be the first to say a big part of the reason modern drummers started getting more staccato and quantized is the influence of drum machines. Here I'm emulating some of the kick type stuff you probably want to be able to do. It's not just placing the kick in the right place, but also making it lock up with the complex linear and non-linear stuff going on with the hands. The extreme lockup with things like ghost notes is part of the idiom as well. And if you want a complete lesson on how to play the kick drum, just click here. But for how to practice this type of lockup for starters, let me give you 2 examples. First, I'm just playing 16ths on the hats with a moving grid of kick doubles. Now, I'm doing the same thing over a don't stop till you get it done. This is also crucial over shuffles, so I'll do 2 dimensions of grid here. The first is consecutive swung-ins. The second is consecutive doubles nested within quarter triplets. And if we're being sticklers, you should probably practice all this stuff with the hats and the left foot too. And that's how you get the gig. Anyway, did we do a thing, you guys? Am I right on with these? Am I way off base? Leave a comment below, a polite comment. And folks, if you want to get the free transcription, we've already done it for you. You have only to click the link below the player and tell us where to send it on the next page. Dudes, it's been real. I always enjoy these. See you again real soon in another lesson of the week. A roll of narration audio. When I haven't been doing jujitsu for half a week. Number 1, my energy's higher. Number 2, my voice sounds better. Number 3, I'm not dying of any skin infections, except maybe I am.